It's small and powerful, but it's a little nose heavy. Hey there, I'm John, this is Two Brothers RC, and this...
Oh, good God, that's wetter.
...is the brand new J-10 64mm from FMS, and it's nothing like the 90mm J-10 from Freewing. That's both a good and a bad thing.
Whoa!
It's good because it's lightweight. It's bad because it's nose heavy, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Not nose heavy in the sense that it's unflyable, just that it's not capable of the kind of flying that I want to do. But that's okay, we'll still give it an objective review score. Let's kick this off by covering agility. Remember when I said that it's a little nose heavy? Again, it's not impossible to fly, but it definitely needs all the control surface authority that you can give it. If your high rates are 10mm up and 10mm down, you're going to find that this plane is almost completely uncontrollable at low speed. The slower an aircraft flies, the more surface deflection you need to affect its flight trajectory. This becomes even more critical when you're talking about a nose-heavy kite like the J-10. Have you ever tried driving a car at slow speeds? The slower you go, the more you need to move the wheel to make an appreciable difference in the path the vehicle is taking. At high speeds, you barely move the wheel to turn. This is very similar to how an aircraft operates, but when a plane is nose heavy and it has limited throw, you simply have no authority at lower speeds. This is why I recommend flying at 150 travel with 50% expo in general. This will give you the authority to control the plane throughout its flight envelope, though you will want to run 70% expo on the aileron stick with this jet, because the full span ailerons of this bird make it very touchy in the roll axis. Nose heaviness, also known as positive stability, resists control input. Because it's positively stable, the jet doesn't really benefit from a gyro stabilizing the pitch axis or the yaw axis. You do get some benefit out of the gyro in general, but it has to be tuned with throttle-based gains to avoid oscillation on the roll axis, like what you're seeing here. If you want to understand the theory behind throttle-based gains, I would suggest that you go ahead and click the card at the top right and check out the AS3X Plus guide that we posted recently. Nose heaviness has a few effects on an aircraft. Of those effects, first and foremost is that it causes resistance to control inputs. I'm using the entire elevator stick to get it to stay here in a high alpha pass. A neutrally balanced plane like my Freewing J-10 needs very little elevator input to enter and stay in a high alpha pass. You can see a massive difference here between the two jets, and it's not because the 90 is bigger, it's because the center of gravity is balanced aft because I can get it there on that jet by pushing the battery all the way back. The 64mm battery tray does not allow for this. Now, you could slam a pack under the turtle deck without any straps, but getting the center of gravity too far back with fixed canards will lead to alpha lock, where the slower you go, the more the canards force the nose to point up until you bleed energy and you can't do anything but crash. This was an issue on the Rafale 64mm, but I was able to glue the canards downward to keep it from being a major problem. On the J-10, there's no way to do that. Canard position directly relates to center of gravity. Nose-heavy jets should use neutrally trimmed canards, which the J-10 does have. Neutral or tail-heavier jets strongly benefit from canards pointed down by 10 to 20 degrees. You would naturally think that this would cause issues with drag, but it doesn't. Here's why, according to our friend Alejandro of the channel Air Guardian. An airplane shapes the air as it flies, as you see here in this old NACA footage. Downward pointed canards cause air to flow under the canards and over the wing, similar to how the slot on this wing is causing air to stick to the wing at higher angles of attack. Because air has to flow under the canards as it's being shaped by the jet's presence in the sky, they're still seeing a positive angle of attack. Long story short, point your canards down while flying on an aft center of gravity. They create a slot for the air to flow over the wing and help resist stalling in high alpha. This is why the Rafale 64mm did so well after the canard mod that I was talking about. Unfortunately, as I've mentioned, this is not something that you can do to the J-10 from FMS, at least not without extensive mods, but it's good info to know regardless. Another thing to note is that nose heaviness also resists turbulence and wind, too. It creates the stability that a gyro would offer if you were flying on a neutral or tail-heavy center of gravity. Some pilots prefer that, but I certainly don't, because nose heaviness also requires a bunch of pitch-up trim. So you introduce drag, which slows the aircraft down. It also causes it to pitch up as it speeds up in the air. You can tell that I don't fly nose-heavy airplanes very much because I forgot about this and I got too low with a barrel roll, and I crashed.
Awesome!
Oh my.
This is why I'm strongly against nose heaviness and I prefer an aft center of gravity with a well-tuned rate gyro. When they're properly set up to fly like a fighter jet, the gyro prevents this from happening entirely. You can peg the throttle and it won't pitch up on you, which makes low-level acro much easier to perform without the jet fighting the inputs that you're giving it. I've never put a plane into the ground like this before. It's not the jet's fault, it's mine. I should have realized that it was this nose heavy when I was flying it and not tried to get so low with it. The full span elevons this jet ships with do make it fly reasonably well, but it's unfortunately not hitting all of the criteria for agility. First, it can't be flown neutrally, or at least I wasn't able to figure out how to do that before I crashed it. Second, it's not easy to make less nose heavy, but it does take off and land without struggling. In fact, after getting the wheeled flights in, I would say to take the wheels off entirely and hand launch it. We'll cover how to land it after hand launching in the landing gear section coming up. It has plenty of thrust with the wheels removed, and it's very difficult to get it into a stall that's unrecoverable, which is great. And yes, I know I look stupid running with a transmitter in my hand to chase a tiny jet.
I caught up with it.
A little bit.
I was able to fly and run, and I probably looked dumb as hell.
Oh yeah, you did.
Feel free to point out how dumb I run with a transmitter in the comments. I deserve it. The J-10-64 gets a 3 out of 5 in the agility section. Unfortunate, but pretty common with these smaller 64mm jets. Let's talk flight time. Most pilots are going to have flights that average anywhere within the 3 to 4 minute range. That's not great, but it's not bad. It's just above average. You're not going to get 3 to 4 minutes if you're pegging the throttle. How long an airplane flies is inversely proportional to how much you move the throttle stick forward during a given flight. The faster you make it go, the shorter the flight is going to be. Conscientious pilots trying to be nice to their batteries by flying mixed throttle will get you up to 4 minutes of flight, earning a 4 out of 5 in the flight time review. Now let's go ahead and talk landing gear while we're here. The landing gear on this jet are actually pretty good for 64. There's zero suspension, but that's normal for single 64mm jets. Yes, it does sound like a dumpster rolling around. Yes, it's loud, very loud even. Yes, I do think you should remove the wheels.
Like pretty much every 64mm jet, it pretty much sounds and feels kind of like a toy on the ground.
But if you do decide to keep the wheels on, here's how you land it with them.
For those of you guys who really like 64mm jets and you really like having your gear sticking out, I'm not one of those people, but it's pretty much the same as flying any other 64mm jet. You're going to go ahead and hold the nose up, hold some back pressure on the stick with the elevator, and then you're going to pretty much guide it in with rudder the entire time and just modulate the throttle, meaning that you add more throttle as the plane descends and you lower the throttle as the plane climbs, basically to try to get a nice smooth approach. So we're going to yank it around, hold the throttle to mid right now, holding some back elevator pressure, just kind of like guide it in with the rudder, a little bit of left rudder to line it up with the runway, throttle up a little bit more throttle, touchdown nice and gentle. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is to flying a 64mm delta wing jet with the, even with the gyro helping. I can do it gyroless. We're gonna turn it off. We are gyro off right now. You can see the way the plane is handling. There's no gyro running. It's a little touchy on the roll axis. I need more expo if I'm gonna fly gyroless with this much throw that I'm using. But pretty much, even if you're coming in gyroless, it's the same exact operation. You just use the rudder to line up with the runway. That's pretty much all there is to it.
If you take the wheels off, here's how you land that too.
But when it comes to getting this thing down safe, again, for those of you guys who've never landed a Delta jet or any jet really in the grass, the idea is just to kind of get a nice high angle of attack. You can't really do this without a Delta jet most of the time. Slow it down real good. And then plop it. So pretty much all you're doing is holding the elevator stick and modulating throttle to get it to come down safely.
The J-10-64 gets a 4 out of 5 in the landing gear review. In fit and finish, here's another area where the J-10 is middle of the range. We've got unpainted foam. but all the foam is undamaged out of the box and it doesn't look weird or oddly shaped. The hinges are strong for being made out of foam, but it's got stickers instead of decals. But hey, at least they stick to the plane and they don't peel up, unlike the $700 B1 from X-Fly that somehow comes with stickers at just over 3 times the price of the J-10. You can't explain that. The servos are plastic and they didn't complain about anything we did to the jet. They even kept working after the crash. The ESC didn't overheat at any point. It does come with lights, and they're really bright too. Plus, they're properly done with port and starboard lights being red and green, respectively. I'm actually kind of shocked at how many lights they managed to stuff into these little birds. The battery tray is oh so well done. I just wish I could get the pack further back, but then we'd be talking about how I crashed it from Alpha Lock instead. Overall, it's a fun jet, absolutely middle of the road. There's very little that stands out about it. It's got a great lighting system and it flies way better with the wheels removed. It even flies pretty good after being smushed up and hastily re-glued at the field. If you're big into 64mm jets that you can throw into the car completely assembled, and you have a plethora of 4-cell packs to burn through, I'd say this is a pretty good choice as a park flyer. It's agile, if a little nose heavy, and it doesn't bite. You gotta work super hard to make it stall. Is it a beginner's plane? Definitely not. But it could easily be your third jet once you've got some experience flying.
So close.
Almost.
For the setup info, we flew this jet on a Spectrum AR637T receiver using AS3X Plus. Here's the gyro gains that we used. 1x master gain, 17 roll, 60 pitch, 40 yaw. Stop lock rate was set to default, as was the release rate in priority. If you saw some wobbling in the video, it's because it took a while to figure out what roll gains would be best for this jet at all airspeeds using throttle-based gain mixing. You might want to run 12 roll instead just to tamp it down a little if it's windy. Oh, and as promised, here's uncut footage of how the jet fared after being all smushed up from the first wreck. It absolutely amazes me how well something can fly even when it's all busted up.
Now, making it worse, I actually did pay for this jet because FMS didn't want to send it out to anybody for some reason, so there goes $200, but I'm going to make it the best $200 I've ever flown. That nose is doing a good job of staying on.
Oh yeah.
I think it came off finally.
Maybe. No, it's still dangling. Ah, almost had it. Almost had it. It was close.
Hey, it's...
But the nose survived.
The tail didn't.
I mean, it's still with the plane, at least. Going again. Hey! Good catch.
Well,
Whoops.
well, that about sums up our adventures with the J-10 64mm. It's a fun little jet. Unfortunately, well, when you wreck it, you can pretty much do whatever you want to with it at that point. Somehow the nose is still dangling.
It's a pretty solid piece of tape or whatever that is. Go make it a helicopter.
I'm impressed at how well that held on. The jet fly is pretty good overall. It is kind of squirrely, so you're gonna probably notice that. And what kind of caught me is that it tends to pitch up a lot at full throttle. So when I went into that initial barrel roll low to the ground, being, you know, that full speed like that, when it rotated, it went bam, right into the ground. I should have seen that coming. I already knew that was a problem. I kept having to push the nose down the entire time I was flying it. Well, it's a foam plane. These things happen. And they happen especially if you don't pay attention to the warning signs the plane gave you. Is it fun to fly? Yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. While it was still in one piece, it's kind of a horrible looking pile of shit now.
Be sure to hit that like button if you think rubber wheels instead of miniature dumpsters should be normalized for every airplane. And if you like what we do here at Two Brothers RC, hit that super thanks button to show your appreciation, or swing by the merch shop link below to pick up your own swag, and maybe send in a donation too, to help us pick up a MiG-29 from Freewing to really show what it can do. See you guys next week.